Okay, karibuni.
Yes, welcome on board. So,
Yeah.
do you want us to do introductions, Ama?
Of course, we need to start with introductions.
Okay.
Because I realized even I'd end up not watching these things, in sequence. Sometimes it depends on the topic I want to cover. So you're most welcome. Most welcome to all of those who are joining us today, whether it's on Zoom or Facebook. We are glad to have you back, and we are glad to continue with these conversations. So really, my name is Shalom Muniri. I'm really passionate about, what did I say? I'm passionate about family. I'm passionate about young people. And therefore, this is a topic that for me is really, really important, something that I feel we must keep having conversations about. So we've been talking about supporting our teens' mental wellness. And with me is Mark and Wix, and they're going to introduce themselves.
Ladies first.
Hi. Thank you everyone for joining. My name is Wix Mutinda. I am an artist. I am a journalist. I also run a foundation called Care to Share that's about mentorship at children's homes. I love chilling with kids and teens. I love being young and playing and having fun. Yeah.
Kwa majina kawaida ni kama vile unaona hapa kwa television. My name is Mark Ndwati. I am a son, a husband, a father, a youth pastor. I remember last week nilisahau kuambia where I'm a youth pastor at Nairobi Chapel South, which is at College of Insurance. And then I also run a youth initiative called the Plug Youth. So basically that's where I generally directly disciple young people in partnership with Nairobi Chapel. Yeah, and I have other things that I do, but today I had asked our host if we could take some time to debrief some of the things that alitushtua nazo last week. Some of us we were holding our hearts from jumping out of our mouths. So if you could allow us, Shalom, to help us process not a couple of things, maybe they were in one direction. I think it's really about the image we portray, or the people we become or not become in our parenting journey, even as our kids are growing up. I guess for me, the things that caught me unawares was there were a couple of things we were talking about in terms of in the relationship of like if it's a mom with a daughter, to the extent that you become competition in your daughter's circles. And you actually even went deeper. Hata sijui kama niko ready kusema vitu zingine ulisema hapa. But basically that how can I put it, that you are, it's like that situation where the dads wamekuwa wababa in Nairobi mali yes, people have families, but you're still trying to date or trying to become a sponyo to children who are your daughter's age, really. So in a similar effect also to the side of you women now, you're probably side yetu, they used to be called bentens or something like that. Like there can be an unhealthy relationship that develops just because of your disposition or how you interact or how you dress or how you basically who you are towards your daughter's or son's age mates and stuff like that. So that actually caught me unawares. I was like, hey, hold up. What do you, hey, is this happening? Like, I don't know. In the back of my mind, I thought yes, of course it happens, but I hadn't brought it to my, like,
Yeah.
Not over here,
so
not around.
Yeah, no, not around me.
Yeah.
But it was interesting.
Yeah.
Like during the week, I watched some movie, and one of the ladies, a mom to one of the main characters was actually hitting on his buddy.
Wait, a mom to the main character.
It was so funny that we
was hitting on the child's
there's a couple of characters who are the main characters. Yeah. And the mom was hitting on him, and this was happening to them as grown-ups. It wasn't just a teenage setting. It was grown-ups. Yeah, so it's actually easy to get to that place. It's actually easy to get to the place where you're hitting on your daughter's friends.
Awkward.
Like even the fact that you even saying it like that, to me, as in, it doesn't make sense in terms of okay, maybe your age, sawa, I understand the age, but not in that close proximity. I don't know if I'm making sense. Maybe if you're out there, you've gone for an event, it's an office event or whatever. If that happens there, sawa. Not sawa, but sawa. But now this is close. This is in your circle. This is at home, where, when we were young boys, we used to joke about it. Like you'd see it in movies, like someone would go and tell their friend, hey, your mom is hot. But that was about it. Like it never, we don't know of any case that ever progressed beyond.
Actually, the right thing you're saying is that you don't know of any case.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now they're there.
So now that we are in this hole and we are trying to process this, what do we do? Like, how do you get yourself out of there? Like,
okay, they separate. I don't know. There's different aspects of that question, because there's how do you get yourself out of there? Is it you, the mom, you, the parent, you, the mom or dad, or is it you, the kid, who is now affected? Because you see, we're talking about supporting our teens' mental wellness.
Yeah, let me put it in the most innocent of ways. Let's say maybe you are not intending, like you are just you, and then
you're just hot.
Discover that you're just you, and then you discover there's this kid who's fallen for you, and they have been making all signals available to you, and because of the place you are in life, on a normal day you would have just brushed it off and moved on with life, but mali huko, the attention is actually getting to you. You're like, hey, the last time I actually enjoyed such attention, it's been a while. And also putting the scenario, let me add the scenario also for you're a single mom.
Yeah.
Yes, so you're not married, you have needs.
Therefore, it's not even compare, it's open space.
Yes. So, but you are not intentionally thinking of getting into this space or trying to even get into that avenue with any child, quote unquote. But now here you're enjoying the attention. You're not quick to push this person away. You're like, okay, let me see how this friendship. I'm liking the warmth. You get. Kumekuwa na baridi sana, so at least roho yangu inapata joto from somewhere. Yeah.
So you're asking, how do you get out? First and foremost, you have to do something about seeking that warmth somewhere else. So it has to do with setting boundaries.
Nairobi baridi. Nairobi kupata joto ni ngumu. just to say.
I know, but I mean, but for crying out loud, your son's friend, your son's buddy, I think that one requires boundaries.
I know. There's, Mark, you're asking that question, and I'm remembering of some posts I saw a friend of mine sharing a while back on social media on, I think it was either Facebook or Instagram. And it was one of those long posts alert, but just to summarize it, she was basically about the way growing up when she was a teenager, there are people, not even a teenager, like way from primary school, there are people they are grown-ups she was crushing on, they are grown-ups around you, they're around you in school, you'll be like, this teacher is not that bad looking, this one, this is my type.
But these were crushes.
Sorry?
Yeah, they were crushes. We never brought this into
here. So she was talking about all those crushes and all those people she was looking at. And you see, I mean, crushing, it is just, what is a crush? A crush is someone you're crushing on and thinking, the minute you're crushing on someone, you're already thinking of them in a different perspective apart from what they are. This is a teacher, but you're like, this teacher can be more than just a teacher, this neighbor can be more than just a neighbor, So she was basically talking about all those grown-ups that were around her and she was crushing on, and of course being that kind of girl who would throw signals to them and she would talk to them in a certain way. Then now she's posting this, sharing this, saying that she's so grateful that those people were grown up enough not to take those signs and make a move, because if they had made a move, she could have definitely gone all in, all away, all like, exactly. I'm here,
wow.
I've already crashed. So she was just saying she's super grateful for those people, that the fact that they ignored her signals and just continued treating her like the child she was. At some point, especially in high school, she was so disappointed. She was like, how slow are these grown-ups? They can't get these signs. They don't know what I'm after, and I'm here,
Walikuwa wanakusaidia.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think so right now, looking back,
I think that's actually such a good answer to that question of what does somebody do? You have to actually, the grown-up has to be the one to set the boundary, not the kid. There's someone saying that I remember when I was younger, like in 20s, an older man would hit on me. The major deterrent was the fear of ever being seen with a dude my dad's age. Yeah, I mean, that's a genuine, that's the other one. When you're young, you don't want to be seen with a guy your dad's age or a girlfriend your mom's age.
Yeah.
However, that was before a cougar became a sexy thing to be.
Hey, pole.
Okay, I'm sorry. We're not even supposed to be going that direction.
Hi. Okay, fine. Yeah.
Sawa, Shalom, sawa.
Today is not about such. I think we should have had that conversation during evolution of sex. But today.
But you see, lazima tu debrief hizi vitu because tunaweza kuwa tunaendelea na tumeacha watu nyuma.
Okay.
Yeah. So just finish what you were saying and then we can wrap up the debrief.
Okay. So basically, what I'm trying to say is that times have changed, and that's the part that we actually, it's related to what we are talking about today. The messaging basically has become that it's okay as a mama to date your kid's friend, and I like that example that you are giving of you're a single mom, therefore there's no compare, there's nobody, it's not even infidelity. It's fair game. This young man is hitting on you, he's your son's buddy, therefore hey, I need some warmth, as you were saying, it's available, and fresh blood is actually tastier than this other one. And so, well, that's what I hear. I must be however, what has happened is the messaging we've been getting is that it's actually okay. You know, this person who's commented on the group has said, the fear of ever being seen with a dude my dad's age, you know. So we had that thing of, there was an area where as a kid you wouldn't go, you know, as a young person you wouldn't go. You kept within your lane, which is a certain age range. Right now, it doesn't happen like that. Everything is fair game. I mean, for crying out loud, the French president married his teacher. So, I mean, really, anybody can go anywhere today. So the messaging we are getting is really that it's okay. Yeah, and you know what, like the example that Mwix has given, the bottom line is the grown-up, it's up to the grown-up to set the boundary, not the kid.
Yeah.
But now all of this is coming out, you know, like we're saying, because we're supposed to be talking about supporting teenagers' mental wellness. Yes, that is messing them up. But then again, there's messes that we are seeing without knowing that we are seeing them, without recognizing them for what they are. So probably what I can ask the people listening right now, what are some of the signs, you know, what are some of the signs you know that are not, that show that all is not well? Common signs, by the way. There's some that are usual, and then there are others that are not. What are some of the common signs that you can think about?
In terms of the conversation, or just now mental wellness?
Mental wellness, just signs that, you know, things are not right.
Okay, makes sense.
Because you see, a lot of the time, you'll find an adult looking for untidiness, because those are some of the things that people say, you know, like, okay, my kid is not showering, so they must be depressed. Maybe they really have nowhere to go. You know, there's a time I was talking to somebody who was talking about the toughness of being in a transition. You know, you've just finished school, and then you're in a place where you're trying to figure out what you're going to do. Showering is not an option. It has nothing to do with being untidy or being depressed. Yeah, it's about, I don't feel like doing it right now. But then we have parents who will take that lack of showering to be a sign of depression or a sign of mental illness. Yeah. There's a comment on here that says, speaking to some young adults, some of it is driven by money. We are too focused on materialism. It's about things and using people to get things. Yes, this is the one for hitting on people who are older than you, you know, the young adults. And then somebody else says that I agree with the adults setting the boundaries. I've met some young men in their 20s who've had the guts to hit on me. These conversations have to be killed very quickly.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, so you set the boundary. But then what are some of the common things that show you, all is not well? People have mentioned appetite, either shooting up or shooting down.
True.
What else have you had? Once you've been dealing with people, what have you had?
Oh, wow. Let me tell you some of these signs, or rather some of these people I've dealt with, they really know how to cover, the craft of covering up, you know, and living up to the society expectations. Like, you people expect me to be happy at this moment, I'm gonna be happy. But then you just realize that there are a lot of moments of getting lost. Like,
what do you mean?
If you're keen, you will realize that this person is, at one point, they are very conversational, they are very hyper, they are talking, they are contributing into conversations. And then in the middle of it, as you say something, you just find that they diverted and they're just absent. They are not there. They're just gone. They've gone to that safe space of theirs, that safe space. They are going to lock themselves up, or maybe they are trying to recharge to know what they're going to say after you're done commenting as well.
Okay.
So there's always a zoning out has been the key one for people I met, because they are super talkative. Super talkative, they will kick off conversations, they'll be hyper, and they know exactly what you want to hear, so they will tell you that.
True.
You know. So so being keen enough to realize how they respond to answers, to your greeting. Like, how are you? There's that cliche for when you're told how are you, the answer is supposed to be fine. Which, oh man, that is an entire story that we cannot even go to right now.
By the way, let me tell you for free.
Yeah.
Any kid who tells me, well, kid and now the grown-ups who know me, anybody
Yeah.
who tells me they're fine.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, that means freaked out, insecure, neurotic, and emotional.
Wow. Rewind.
Freaked out,
Okay.
insecure, neurotic, and emotional. So can you imagine, because of having such conversation, my kids never ever tell me I'm fine. They don't even use, we don't use that word unless you actually want to say you have a problem.
Yeah.
Because then we know that it means I'm freaked out, insecure, neurotic, and emotional. So we'll then ask what is going on. So I feel like you need to find a way of expressing how you're actually feeling, because terms like I'm good, I'm fine, I'm okay, you know.
I'm okay. Yeah.
I'm okay, you know. Until now,
Yeah.
we had to have this branding of it's okay not to be okay, you know, because
Yeah.
everybody just says I'm okay, even when you're not.
Even when you're not okay.
Then when you're not okay. Personal grooming is another thing that people neglect.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that thing of saying I'm fine.
Yeah.
Then there's the one of not caring. So you're actually even smelly, hair is tacky, you know, all of those things.
Yeah.
Then there's appetite change. That's another one that I've had. And I know that many, what do I say, parents of teenagers start wondering, how come they're not eating, you know? And then if we look at, by the way, that one for eating, if we actually look at parents of girls, you never know that thin line between becoming, you know, bulimic and anorexic versus I've just lost my appetite is very, very thin. So you end up having a kid who has bulimia struggles, and yeah, you haven't noted it because you didn't notice the appetite change and things like that. So that's another one that comes up. Then they sleep patterns.
Have a comment, Shalom.
Yeah.
We have a comment, someone saying that there's a complete loss of interest in what they love to do, such as school, social life, and work. No more complaining about anything. One acting out of character. Yeah.
And we'll actually look at how some of those things happen, by the way, because it's, what did I say? Based on how I've listened to teens, they kind of like give us those hints. Yeah. And we'll get to them. Then there's the other one that says, this is a question, you know, like, how do we teach our younger children to express their emotions with clarity before we get the turbulent teens? Yeah. So we'll actually deal with that just now. So those are some of basically the examples, but then the lesser known mess, you know, this loss of interest, you know, things like that, those are things that we kind of like know. But the lesser known mess is the information that's available about mental health. We never consider that to be a mess, but our kids are going online and finding information, or we are also going online and finding information, and it's hard to tell what's real and what's fake. Because to tell you the truth, the other thing that's there is self-diagnosis. I promise you, if you're feeling anything wrong with you today and you go and Google it, you will come up with a condition that you have. Yeah. I do not think anybody has ever gone onto Google to look for symptoms of a problem and come out healthy. You actually come out worse, right? So self-diagnosis is just too easy. Then the other thing that's happening, we don't accept that everybody needs to soothe themselves somehow. You know how kids suck thumbs or have that blanket? Yeah. When we grow up, we throw away the blanket. Okay, watch even when we grow up. As our kids are growing up, we tell them to throw away the blanket, to stop sucking their thumbs, and then we deny them a way to actually soothe themselves. You know, when they're agitated or they need to calm down, we don't equip them with the skills to actually calm down. And that's related to this question: how do we teach our younger children to express their emotions with clarity before we get the turbulent teens? We need to allow them to express how they're feeling, not just deal with the emotions. We need to allow them to express how they're feeling. Then once they have expressed, we tell them this is the healthier way to do it. So for example, right now I'm in a place where I'm dealing with 5- and 6-year-olds, right? And these 5- and 6-year-olds come and they say, I want. You know, they don't know how to ask things nice, you know, like what we say politely. So teaching them how to express themselves is to kindly and politely tell them, gently tell them, you don't say I want, you say, may I, please, may I, just use some of those words. Why? The more they're learning how to express anything, it doesn't even have to be a very high emotion. It's just learning how to express themselves little by little. You teach them how to talk about anything and everything. So when it comes to emotions, we basically then will show them and guide them on how to express them properly. Because this is what happens. When, you see, like how when a kid is sad or when something has gone wrong, you just need to hug them and the hug works. When we don't transition out of that through the teens and into adulthood, we will still need that hug. We will still need somebody to tell us that something is okay, everything is going to be okay. Now, what happens in adulthood, the hug very easily converts into a sex addiction. And I know I'm doing the thing that Mark doesn't like, of high speed, from hug to sex. But if as a baby you need to be held and your love language is touch, for instance, as an adult, you're still going to look for it. And if the way of getting it is really through having sexual contact and touch with somebody, you can get yourself down that road of addiction. So that's one of the places that goes down.
So,
okay.
For us, some of us, touch is not a love language.
Yes.
In fact, we wonder how that it is.
Mm-hmm.
So help us understand how someone whose love language is touch, they generally process things.
They want to be held. They want to be patted. They want to be, they're the ones who want to be given a high five, when they're being congratulated. They have a lot of touchy ways of expressing themselves. So you'll find there's that kid who's able to play alone and not feel too bad about it. They're quite secure. And then there's the one who wants to be held.
Yeah.
Right? And they feel better when they're held. As they're growing up, they want to, like fist bumps, high fives, they're those teenagers who you find they're dying for contact type expressions of affirmation.
Okay.
The more they're not getting that, you see, when they're at the point where they don't understand themselves and who they are, they will go and look for that soothing somewhere. And that's how it ends up becoming unhealthy.
So basically what you're saying is, so if I don't get it, it becomes a problem. And I get to levels of desperation where I can get it anywhere it is available.
Exactly. And
okay, now that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
If the first path becomes an unhealthy one, then you go down the wrong road very fast.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
You go down.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that ends up happening. Yeah. So comment here. Many parents need to heal to become better parents. One of the ways we push our kids further away is our egos and not listening. Hurt people hurt others. Many children are troubled because of the pain from home. So how can such parents be helped to help their children? Layers and layers of trauma unchecked. And there is just one example of where some of that starts. A kid who likes to be touched does not get the healthy touch as they're growing up. They will still seek that touch and they will respond to that touch later on in life.
And also something else, Shalom, that has come to my mind as you were talking about that is interacting with some teenagers at some point. One of the things they kept on saying was, when I ask them whether they have these conversations with their parents, they like, my parents are coming home and they're really tired. And when they ask you how you are, they expect you to say fine and go, because they will ask you how you are as they pass or as they walk or as they do something else. Yeah. So even when you look at them, they really don't have that time for you to sit down and start explaining how you really are. So for you not to be a bother or a burden, because they're already doing so much for you, you have to be, just say they're fine and they're good and go. So again, when you're talking about expressing, the teenagers expressing themselves, the question is there room for them to express themselves?
let me tell you what, even when the parents deny that room, the teenagers look for it.
Yeah.
And that's how they end up in some of the places where they end up. You know, however unhealthy that may be. So there's always going to be somewhere for them to find it.
Lean on.
Yes, there's always going to be a shoulder to lean on. Problem is it going to be the best shoulder or not? Is it going to be a shoulder that serves them well or not? Because then the repercussions are for later, right? So
yeah,
when we look at that, I want to look at like how basically getting our children, this comment about layers and layers of trauma unchecked. What happens is throughout life, we get lots of experiences that cause us loss and therefore trauma, right? Quick line in between. Not every loss ends up being traumatic, but many, many losses that we get, which we are not equipped to deal with, end up causing some form of trauma, right? And then we are unable to deal. We are unable to deal with that. So one of the things that when we are being told about dealing with loss and everything else, there's something that guys a lot of the time talk about. And they talk about this key process that says, oh, you're in denial and then soon you have to accept, right? But I want us to look at this based on how it affects our children. So not just about the dead person, but how it actually affects our teens. So if we look at some of the things that happen to our teenagers' lives, they lose friends through relocation, right? We have local and international relocation that's happening. Yeah. And
Shalom.
yes.
Could I interrupt you a bit? There's a question. I don't know if we leave it.
Yeah, we'll answer that.
We might lose it. Yeah.
This one's for about helping a parent transition.
Child whose love language is touch.
Yeah, no, we won't lose it. We'll actually answer in what to do.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah, thanks. So now what happens is these children end up losing their friends through local and international relocation. So people are moving. And then we say, you know what, it's part of life. To a grown-up, it is part of life. To your teenager, they're squarely at the point where they're supposed to be forming deeper relationships and just farming up their identity. And suddenly, people who they knew have to move, or they have to move away from people that they knew. Then there is a major one that happens, school transfers. Oh, even somebody has just said that. They also lose friends when we keep moving schools. Every time you're stepping up or something happens, you change your child's school. What ends up happening is your child can't form a friendship that's going to last them a lifetime. And you see, remember last week we talked about detaching, how detaching in the teenage level is actually a natural thing to do. This kid wants independence from you, and you're also feeling like they're old enough to be left behind. But if they've never learned how to attach, if they've never learned how to be anchored somewhere because you're always moving schools, then you have a problem. And it takes a long time for children to make friends. Moving from kindergarten into primary is a lot easier. But moving in between middle school and moving in between high school, those are some of the worst places to transition a kid as far as school is concerned. Then there's another thing that we don't talk about enough. That is financial situations that are going on within the family. You know, when you become suddenly broke or suddenly loaded, that still affects our teenagers. Because sometimes, suddenly broke is usual. Or they're going to be sad because, you know, you're moving downwards, you know, poverty is checking in. Those ones are the ones that people understand. People normally ignore the kids who move on up because of financial situations becoming better. Now, suddenly, this kid who could not afford something can have 10 of it. Then they end up going to school, and because they're so excited, their excitement comes out as bragging. They get rejected out of the bragging, you know, and then they're not able to deal with that rejection. You get where I'm saying how some of these things just come and mess up. So the financial situation is not just about poverty.
Yeah.
The financial situation changing also has to do with moving on up, what we call moving on up. It's messing up many teenagers. I know one who actually, parent moved them from, you know, downtown to uptown. And she actually one time asked me, who said I wanted to move? Back again to the chasing dreams, right? because you're chasing your dreams, your financial situation becomes better, and therefore you relocate your family. When I relocated my kids, because I've pulled a move like that one, they were not amused, by the way. And it took the first several months, we had to keep commuting back to where we had come from for them to transition out of that relationship or figure out how is this relationship going to work with these new dynamics. And luckily, it was a local relocation. You know, it wasn't, we didn't move country. We just moved estates, right? And then we came from this very populous estate where we were like, I don't know how many 100 houses to one that had less than 15 houses. So when you have a social child and you're moving them from a crowd into, you know, a gated community, it messes them up in one way or another. And you're supposed to note some of those things and explain them away, right? So other things that happen is now stigmatization and even death. When they lose their friends, many times we assume that our children do not grieve. Our children do not feel loss. So you find here is a teenager. So you're the parent, here is a teenager, and their cousin or their auntie or their somebody has died. We tend to think that school is a lot more important than a funeral. So you end up saying that they can stay in school. You will tell them after they come from school, but you're not giving this child a chance at closure, you know? And we tend to say it's never that serious. So we ignore them and shut them up. And which, as you were saying, they learn how to not bring it up because after all, it doesn't matter or it doesn't seem to matter. But here is what happens. Because our teenagers have access to information, they're going to find that information and they're going to self-diagnose. And once they self-diagnose, they also go there and look for, how do I stop myself from feeling bad? How do I self-soothe? How am I going to make this pain go away? And that's where some of these other issues now come, the issues that we are complaining about having with teenagers, weed and all other substances that they're having. It's not the neighbors who are the problem as much as what else is going on in this kid's life that makes them attracted to that. Then there's things like self-harm. When a kid is harming themselves, they're moving pain from the emotional pain to physical pain. Because the emotional pain is too hard to bear, then they cause some physical harm to themselves, they feel pain, and they get distracted mentally towards that pain. And therefore, there's a benefit in harming yourself, which is why many struggle to stop, because there's a feel-good factor in harming yourself. And they're feeling good because it is soothing them. Then there's sexual experimentation. Back again to this child whose love language is touch. The minute they're looking for touch, enter boarding school, single-sex boarding school, and then they go in there and somebody touches them a certain way. Two things. Number one, there's that kid whose love language is touch. And then there's that other factor that when God made sex, he saw it was good and designed our bodies to respond to sex, or rather to respond to sexual stimulation. So this kid goes to a school, has been looking for somebody to hug them. They get hugged or held or touched by a person who's going to orient them differently, right? It ends up feeling natural and it becomes so much easier to get there. So by the time the parent is panicking about the things the kid is doing, the problem started a while back, okay? So the idea is to understand natural processes and natural systems that happen in our kids' lives.
And
so
on
when
that,
they're losing something, yeah.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest, I don't know whether it's a mistake or assumption that a lot of parents make or grown-ups make is trying to assume that they understand the relationships between their teens, their kids, with other people, with those relatives. You know, there are those relatives that your families are not that close, but you guys are related. So you've happened to go for one family get together or something, and then your child just clicked with that distant relative from whoever and they're super tight. But because you parents have grown apart and you're not that close anymore, you assume that, I mean, we have no attachments with the family of kina so and so. So when things happen there, there's no need of telling our kids what has happened there.
Yes.
It is, and it is not that important.
And yet they're connected.
It is super, they're super connected, and there's something, they actually mean something to your child, Yeah.
So we end up ignoring some of those relationships.
Yeah,
you end up ignoring some of those relationships, and then you're wondering what happens when they lose any of these people. They lose friends through school, moving, relocating neighborhoods, there's churches, and then of course there's family breakup. When as parents we separate, the child feels some sort of loss. So the first thing they do is deny. They go through the same grieving process. But what denial does, it helps them deal with that emotional pain. It's helping them just deal with it. After that, they get angry. So many times we are seeing our teens throwing tantrums or having anger outbursts, and we are not able to figure out where it's coming from. They're going through some sort of loss at some point in time, right? The other thing they do is start negotiating, because I think the natural, what is it called? The defined third step is actually bargaining, right? And so they get to the point where they're bargaining and trying to think, okay, mom, I will do this. If I do this, will you, if I did better in school, can I remain in the same school? If my grades went up, can I stay in the same school? You are probably moving the child based on the education system. They are thinking that it's because of their grades. So they start blaming themselves, and then now, trying to negotiate with you to see how they can remain. So such things end up happening. But for parents, when you see your child going through a problem, whatever it might be, they're depressed, they're self-harming, they're having an eating disorder, they're experimenting sexually, they're doing things that you think are a sign of a mental problem, one of the things that happens is that parents start blaming themselves or looking back with guilt and neglect, and that does not help the child. Because at the time that you're looking back, regretting, feeling guilty, etc., you're not moving on to help them and to help yourself find a solution. And so that part for, bargaining and trying to negotiate and say, if I could do this, then this, if we moved, if I bought for you, it ends up making the relationship very, very messy. Yeah. One time a child caught the dad, in a compromising situation, and decided that she can manipulate him, and started asking for things. And at first she was threatening that she would reveal, the information she had discovered about the dad. But what ended up happening is, because the dad doesn't want the girl to reveal the information, he started giving her whatever she wanted. It got to a point, she was actually so stressed because she said, I don't want anything from this father. I want him to actually confess he did something wrong, that sort of thing. And so many times when we are at the point we are trying to negotiate and try to make things better, either out of anger, guilt, regret, and things like that, we end up not dealing with the issue at hand, right? And there's this thing that adults have learned how to say. And they say it so nicely, it is what it is, Mwix have heard you say that many times, it is what it is. It isn't what it is. It isn't, yeah? Because we cannot wave a magic wand and expect problems to go. Once your child has transitioned to a different school and they're being bullied, you can't just tell them to ignore. You get it isn't what it is, or it isn't what it isn't.
It isn't. Yeah? It just isn't.
Exactly. It isn't what it isn't, So the question, how does a parent help transition a child whose love language is touch? It's about introducing them to touch as they go and as they grow, right? And then if they get adequate and appropriate touch as a kid, you're able to get the next step of the high fives. You're able to get the next step of fist bumps. You're able to get the next step of just patting them on the back, that occasional one. And you're able to help them see that everything is going to be okay. So the transition has to do with appropriateness. It's not about just ending a certain way of touch. It's just about the appropriateness of the touch as you go along, right? And I must admit that when it came to like hugging, let's say my son, right? I wouldn't necessarily hug him full on. And he's not a touchy-feely kind of person. But when it comes to, let's say, my daughter who's now more touchy-feely, I would still be able to hug her. But a lot of what I'll end up doing is getting to the point of getting her accustomed to side hugs. Just to show that, you know, the hug still happens. It is side, you know, a lot of the time it's occasionally side hug, because then that way you continue giving them the touch. But through teenagehood, affirm them with high fives and things like that. So basically, the transition is in appropriateness as opposed to stopping, you know, moving them from touch to no touch. It is what kind of touch is appropriate along the way. Then now there's a question that says, what is the contribution of both parents in the emotional development of the child? And I'm assuming both here means father and mother. It says, in our culture, mothers are expected to detach from their sons as they grow, yet they still need us even in teenagehood, right? The role, the contribution, let me say there's role and contribution. The contribution of both parents depends on where the parents are coming from. So you might find one that messes up while the other one is building, and therefore makes it hard for the parent who's building to help this child grow, right? Or help this child through this process. Now, you'll find there's a parent who is detached, not interested whatsoever in having a connection with the teen. And then there's this other parent, and in this example, she's saying mothers detaching from their sons. There is something traditional about fathers and sons connecting with each other, and mothers and daughters connecting with each other. I remember when my son got into high school, he got into a boys-only high school. And when we went for the interview, I was told that my role is over. You know, my role as the mom is actually over. And they said they don't care whether I ever come to school again or not. And they said, if I want to connect with other mothers, I can go to their sister school. You know, there's a school for girls and there's a school for boys. So yeah, you brought your son. Right now, who we expect here is the father. You, the mom, disappear. You know, your window dressing, which is not very necessary at this point. The reasoning behind such conversations is because your boy needs to turn out as a man according to a certain tradition. Manhood is called out of boys by men. There's no way women are going to call out manhood from a man at all. That was never going to happen. But the woman still ends up growing and developing the nurturing side of this young man. So one of the things we did traditionally is lean so much on the men calling out the boy or the man out of a boy that we ignored the role of a woman. So what I'm trying to say, in answer to what is the contribution of both parents, the mom is important because she will call out the gentle, understanding part of this young man, but he still needs a man to call out the man in him. Now, incidentally, even the girl needs the man to call out the woman in her. Can you imagine? So that's still a story for another day. But it's contribution for emotional development, every girl needs a man to call out the woman in her. Because many people, we like lightly talking about a girl's first boyfriend is going to be her dad. That used to be the ideal situation. It's no longer the case today. Okay, so you find that if you want the best for your daughter, expose them to a role model who's a man, who's going to call out the woman in her, who's going to define for her, this is how a lady should behave, who's going to call the beauty out of her, who's going to respectfully teach her how to respect herself from a guy's point of view. And I think I gave this example last week when I was talking, well, not in exactly the same context, but I remember, for those who may not know, Mark has been one of the men who I have used to call out the woman in my daughter. Because sometimes when I, as a woman, say, I don't think you should wear that thing, you know, I don't think you should do something like this. I don't think it is respectful for a girl to do this. Or I think men are going to look at you a certain way. I'm a woman, what do I know? But when she's hearing it from a guy, when a man that she trusts is telling her, respect yourself in this way, it's more believable. And I think that was the role that traditionally dads had, saying this is the kind of woman you need to be. But because that is not happening, you need to look for that support system for your children, right? And so, yes, you don't need to detach. You don't need to detach from your son entirely, but you can't say that you're the only one who's going to sort him out, or you're the only one who's going to sort of like do, what is it called? You're the only one who's going to give him his emotional development and all his other development. He needs a male figure, even if the dad is not pulling up the socks, or if the dad is not in that space. You need to surround them with other men. I'm seeing a question just before we move on. How do you transition a child if you're to move out, schools, estates, etc.? I'd say a sort of quick answer to that is involve them in the process from the beginning, because you don't suddenly change schools and estates unless there's in fact, actually, you never suddenly move schools or estates. So you move because of different reasons. It can be, let's start with financial, for instance. If you've made the money and you think now you can afford a better school, involve your child in that process, because actually it's your child who's in school, not you. Parents change schools mainly because of image, or if it's about the child's performance, then they need to be involved in that process. They need to know, in this school, you'll probably get better attention from the teachers and therefore you will perform better, right? If you're moving downwards, for instance, because you can no longer afford school fees where you are, let them know that this is actually what is happening. So that you're guiding them through that process. You're able to tell them, we might be moving school because things are thick, I can't afford school fees. Therefore, you may need to stay home a little bit, or you may need to go to a cheaper school. Walk them through that process. Same thing with estates. One of the things that worked for me was when we were moving from the estate that I talked about to the one that we ended up moving into, I got my kids to come in from the beginning and even choose their rooms, design their own rooms, like have a choice in the matter and participate in that moving process. Because what happens is when they come and they choose their space, then they end up owning it. It ends up becoming my bedroom because this is how I want my bedroom to be. So it's about involving them in the process. So they're not waking up one day and suddenly they find they used to turn left when going home and now you're turning right. And they're told, alas, we have moved. Now, some of these transitions happen because of domestic issues. Family, what is it called? Relationship issues between parents. So let's say you've been having a rocky relationship and suddenly you need to separate. And this kid now cannot continue in the school they were at, or they cannot continue living in the home or estate that they were at. You didn't fight one day and move estate the next. Kids need to be aware that these are some of the possible outcomes of the rocky relationship that I have with your parent. There's a kid one time who asked me why their mom has divorced with the dad, and one of the things she was saying is, why do people divorce? And when I was having this conversation with her, I tried to get to her level. She's about 11 years old, and I tried to get to her level and say, they divorce because of disagreements. They get to a point where they can no longer live together because they're angry with each other. And the kid asked me an interesting question. Why can't they just forgive? Because that's what we tell children. We tell children that when you're annoyed with somebody, talk about it and forgive. So they're wondering, why can't the parents just forgive? And now here you are, you didn't have the conversation and suddenly they have to move estate, move school, move everything. One of the ways to transition this child is to tell them the reality of life. Is that sometimes it's healthier to actually live apart than it is to live together. Because if you're unhappy all the time, then you can't help. You can't be good to this child. If mom comes home angry all the time, if mom and dad are fighting all the time, we are going to put you in danger. So it's best that we separate. But remember, even finding a house is not always overnight. So involve the child and tell them the minute you start thinking about it and it looks like a reality, start talking about it with this child so they can be able to get to that point. And what happens is when we don't understand that these are the things they're doing, back again to what I had said a little earlier, we end up trying to treat the weed problem. We end up trying to treat the self-harm instead of that thing that actually happens. Because a lot of the time, the mess that we see is actually the fruit. The mess that we see is the fruit of things that happened. It's not the root cause. The root cause for teenagers are really a lot of these things where they're unable to cope, right? So some of the messages that we end up getting that we need to be looking for. I had asked at the beginning, signs that all is not well. If I can mention some of the messages, one of them is that it's too hard for me. Meaning whatever it is, this teen is having a problem to cope, is having a problem coping with it. It's just too difficult. So you need to then ask the appropriate question there. Like, how is this working for you? You know, like, what's going on? What are you struggling with? How can I help, right? There are some who the message is basically, I can't deal. You know, too many friends, too many this, too many the other, I can't deal. Again, ask the appropriate question. Some of the messages in the mess is, show me how. I don't know how to do it, just show me. And you see, all they're asking for is, show me. If I can give an interesting one that many people ignore, I'm trying to look at current audience looks like it's more women than guys. So guys, allow me to lean more on the women's side. We have many teenage girls who are struggling because they have no idea how to treat or behave around their periods. And all they need is somebody to show them how. Because what happens is when they're unable to deal with that particular period of their life, they end up feeling dirty, feeling ill-equipped, wondering what's going on, hating womanhood, you know, things like that. I've had kids tell me they want to donate their organs because they just hate this whole idea, right? Guys, the few who are on right now, young boys are wondering, how do I hit on a girl without being rejected? They need help doing some of those things because then they end up having self-esteem issues because they're going at a girl the way they did in the playground. So they need a man to tell them, this is how to carry yourself when some of these things are happening. This is how to hit on a girl. This is how to show respect to a girl. They need somebody teaching them that, right? And so the men need to be talking to the boys, helping them transition. The girls need to be talked to by their moms or the women, because some of the simple questions they're asking is, show me how. Another message in the mess is, I'm giving up. This A student of yours or whatever it is that your teen is going through has been struggling to keep that A, to stay on that pedestal that we were talking about last week. And they're getting to the point they're saying, I'm tired and I'm giving up, I'm overwhelmed, right? When they're there, they may end up exhibiting some of these signs that we were talking about. It's about just asking them the right question. You know, just ask them, how exactly are you doing? Are you struggling with this? You know, ask them specific questions and more so observe. So really, when it comes to what you can do, for us who are parents, and if you're an auntie or uncle to somebody and you see a teen having an issue, basically reflect on possible turning points and transitions in their life that may have been ill-equipped to handle. You know, did you move school? Did you move neighborhood? Did you change churches? Did you change your family setup? Because please remember that your experience of the event is not the same as theirs at all. Your experiences are different. So when they moved to the different place or the new place, were they accepted or rejected? Were they bullied? You know, what ended up happening? How did they experience that new event? Did they get a label? Back again to, we always assume that when you move downwards is when there'll be a problem, and when you move upwards, there's no problem. There's people who move on up and end up being labeled things that are not necessarily helpful. They're called snobs. Yes, they're not able.
Yeah, like I've watched kids moving from, you know, like moving from, let me use an example of what, they're moving from the low side to the high side. And then it becomes a struggle because you're all of a sudden hanging out in these places where you've never hung out before. You're all of a sudden going to the malls and being told to pick what you want, and you are excited about all these things that are happening. And there are other kids there in the mall who are like, yeah, I mean, this is what we do every weekend. Why are you getting so excited? Why are you getting so carried away? What's the big deal? You're going back to school and these are the stories you want to share of the places you visited. And everyone in that school, the kid is forgetting they're not like from the school they came from.
Yeah.
These ones are used to that kind of life. So they're just looking at them like, oh man, this one is not fitting in. Oh, she's struggling. He's not.
She's shady, you know?
Shady. What is that?
Yeah.
You know?
So they end up getting labeled, and their experience of that transition is not the same as yours. So if you are resilient, if you're the kind of person who ignored bullies when you were growing up, your kid doesn't have the same skills. So the idea is to reflect on any transitions that your teen may have gone through and see whether you can help them through that process. Then ask them what they need from you. Ask them about the help they need from you. And the first thing you should do is listen, then you guide without trying to solve all their problems. Let me start from when they were 3, you know, like a 3-year-old. 3-year-olds, why I'm choosing that age is because they're at the point of, I can do it by myself. 3-year-olds have a seriously high self-efficacy. They think they can do anything for themselves. So when they need to dress, they want to dress themselves. When they need to put on their shoes, they want to put on their shoes themselves. They keep saying, I can cook, I can clean, I can serve myself, I can feed myself, I can do everything for myself. At that point in time, listen, guide them, and then let them do it. Because if you show them, they become better. If you show them how to do something and then they allow them to do it, their brains start learning how to solve problems. So every time you're solving their problems, you're weakening their ability to find solutions. So now that 3-year-old, 10 years later, becomes a teenager. By the time they're saying, I don't know what to do, it's because you never trained their brain to think about what to do. So when they're getting stressed, and you're seeing as though they're getting stressed by a small thing, is because you never taught them how to solve small problems. And now here they are with this thing in their hand and they don't know what to do with it. So ask them what help they need from you, then you listen, then you guide. Don't solve all their problems. Then, above all else, seek support. Sometimes the parent is too close for comfort, you know, too close to the issues. If your teen is having issues because of a separation you've had with your partner, you may not necessarily be the best person, like 100%, to sort this out. Yeah. And there's a question I've seen on Facebook that says, I want to read it as it has been written. And it says, are you sure you bring a man in to bring out the woman in her? What if the girl develops feelings towards the man, you know? For me, it will be better done by the dad if he's around and present. Or how exactly does the guy bring out the woman in her? Like, to pay example, please. The example I had given was the one of the man has to be a respectable person whose values you share and all that. And this is in the absence of a dad doing that. So if the dad is actually around and present, then it's his role to do that. But in the case where the dad is not around, or he's around and he's not present, then it is important that another man affirms her. Because as a woman, you'll never ever say with authority that this is what men do. This is what men see, for instance. So in this case of what if the girl develops feelings towards the man? Related to one of the things we had discussed at the beginning, you cannot control the girl having feelings towards the man. This man should be somebody who can be able to do what? To assert a boundary and stop the feelings or the crushes. We had talked about the adult being the one who's responsible for making sure that these feelings are cut and nipped in the bud, you know, that they don't develop into anything. So you shouldn't get the kind of guy who encourages such conversations. That would be extremely dangerous. And you're not getting a guy and then handing over your daughter and leaving your daughter with him, you know, to call out the woman in her. You're actually part of this process. right? It's not about leaving this person alone. Yes, Mark. In fact, you're best placed to answer this question, by the way.
Not the very best placed, but
you're the example that I gave. So go ahead.
Yeah. So I think one of the things around boundaries also is also age. So there's at what age are you involving this person to come into this person's life, and it needs to be earlier on. So if because in my example that you've given, I knew Theros since she was 9, 10, 11, 12.
Yeah, from
And
about 9.
And built that relationship earlier on. Yeah? So by the time I'm able to have this conversation and probably have been in that process of calling the woman out of her, I'm not a stranger. She's at a position where she can't really have feelings for me, because I'm at a zone of where I'm in the scope where she cannot even have feelings for. It's you, like it's those what do you call it, like it's like a big brother or something like that, like I don't know how to better explain it. So the tricky ones is those ones for if the person is younger, it can be tricky. If the person is new in their life, like they have never known this person since they were a child, so they are now 13, 14, and you're thinking, maybe we can do this. That can also bring some complexity. So when we are talking about calling the woman out of this part of this child, it needs to be a relationship that has formed earlier on, age wise. So my gap of age is like almost 20. It's actually 20 years between me and Thero.
Yeah.
So I'm really not in the scope of what do you call it? The nini. And then the environment also matters. The environment is we are in agreement. We are having this conversation knowing that the parent knows that I'm going to have this conversation, and they have given me even tips and whatever what do you call it, whatever things that there's inside knowledge. So I'm getting into this knowing the type of person this person is, and if you need to anticipate the feelings. That's what I'm trying to say. In the environment, you need to anticipate if this person can actually develop feelings towards you. It might be because there's an absent father figure in a way that they are now desperate for. So if you just come in and give that attention, then it can easily spiral into feelings, because it's a desperate situation. But so if it's a desperate situation, there needs to be a more careful approach to it than just offer yourself.
Yes, and that's related to reflecting on transitions.
Yes.
And reflecting on the reality of a situation in the child's life. So for instance, if this teenager has never known their father, they may project on another man. If you're introducing a man or a male figure when they're teens, they may project onto them, right? Because they have not had an opportunity to build that relationship. Then there's the part of sudden loss, there's a sudden loss either through death, divorce, separation. This daughter may actually project on this new man that you're bringing in. So you don't just go picking a guy and bringing him in. You have to have built that relationship over time. And there's somebody who's saying that last week's session about building villages was extremely useful to them in terms of allowing who calls out the man or woman in our children. The shared values must be guiding principles. Back to again, the village never leaves our conversations, is that you're not just picking a guy from somewhere. It needs to be somebody who is part of your village and who you've built relationship with over time. So related to this, again, because we are right here, and I think there are many people who are more concerned about teenage girls and guys, how exactly would a father in an appropriate way help his daughter see and embrace especially her God-given physical beauty? This is a relational question. I mean, no, my answer is a relational answer, is that they have to build this relationship over time, right? So what is the appropriate way? First and foremost is affirming her from when she's young. And let me start with the place where we're talking about an ideal relationship. This dad has been present from the beginning of this girl's life, right? And so from when she started up, from when, I mean, he was the man who told her everything is possible, threw her up and caught her, you know, and I'm trying to imagine a dad with a small kid, you know, the kind of, and mark his father to a young girl, you know, so he can say, I think last week's video starts with his daughter giggling, you know, in the background, is building a relationship with this girl so that first and foremost, trust is established. Now, once trust is established, this man can now tell this girl, do not show off your body a certain way. This man can tell this girl, if you do this, this is how a guy will look at you. Because from the get-go, he established trust with her. And so when he tells her, you are beautiful, she's likely to believe him because she believed that he could catch her. She believed that he would come home when he said he would. She believed, you know, he kept his word right through. And so when he then comes and tells her, you are beautiful, she is likely to believe him. And so this father, the appropriate way of actually helping this daughter is to show her step by step from when she's young that she is beautiful. And then, of course, there's a place where they grow up and they're being given opportunities to date. You know, this father is the one who's supposed to take her out and, you know, and not show her all the fine things in life, because then, oh, poor guy that she'll marry or meet. But it's to sort of show her that she deserves the best in life, whatever best means. I think that's a very subjective kind of statement. So I'll put best in quotes, is that within whatever ability and boundary that this man can do it, he needs to show the girl that she doesn't have to sell herself short to get something from another man. She needs to know that she's so accepted that her decisions, her mistakes, you know, her life choices are really going to be supported from this end, because then it builds the security that she has in herself first and foremost, before she goes looking for it in other men. And you see, security for girls has to do with a lot also with their physical beauty. So they need to be called out and made to feel like they matter, like they are special, by a man who's not calling out a sexual thing. A man who does not want anything from her in return, because I think that's what a father, the ideal father should be. He doesn't want anything but the best for his daughter. He doesn't want anything in return. So when he's telling her she's beautiful, it's not because he wants anything back. And when he has built that trust, then it is a believable thing. And so that's what I think would be appropriate. So a further question in on the Facebook chat is, so the main thing here is for the parent to know the guy in and out and better, because nowadays our teenagers are growing so fast and want to experiment these things a lot. And they are happening with close relatives and close friends, and those we hope to help them end up taking advantage of them being naive. Yeah, you actually need to know the person. And today it's not just about the man, it is the man and the woman, because our children are being propositioned by female aunties. When we were having the conversation about evolution of sex, there's a resource that I shared, and the one on rainbow childhoods. And there were a few examples where girls were introduced to lesbianism and bisexuality by aunties, by female relatives or female friends of their parents. So right now, it's not just about a man. We need to be careful about the people we are exposing our children to. We need to be careful and choosy about the people that we choose to have our children relate with, because either way they may get misled. And I think that's the thing to look out for, is be careful about the people you're bringing around your children, right from that 3-year-old to the teenager moving on up, because once they are post-teens, they will make those decisions for themselves. So technically, in terms of looking for the mess, yes, there are those physical signs that we see, but sometimes we misunderstand the physical signs as the main problem, whereas there's an underlying main problem. So I think in terms of to support our teens mental wellness, is to look at those other things that could be under there that we are not talking about. Losses that they're going through, transitions that they may be going through, issues that they may be facing that we probably know nothing about, is to dig into some of that and then ask, how can I help my teen through this process? That's what I'd say in terms of supporting them. Yeah, yes, Mark.
I wanted to say, some of the successful stories that we've had is because of we've pastored these children from when they were kids.
Mm-hmm.
So we see the transition of this girl or this boy now getting into a space where they are realizing that they are beautiful, they are who they are, and you can see it right from when they are a child. Like, this one, we need to pay special attention here, because if they don't get the right guidance, they might get into a space where this meets them. Like, the world will give them a surprise of all of a sudden men are at your back, like they are giving you attention, and you are not prepared essentially for it. And that's what we're talking about, calling the woman out of the person, is more so of preparing this young girl to meet what is coming. Like, let me tell you right now that you're beautiful. You look like this. So when you get to a certain place, this is the type of attention you will start receiving from men, and that type of guidance repeated over and over. I had a situation with one of the kids in our space. We had gone out for swimming, and these kids actually, after church, they had begged me to talk to their parents to get them out of the house, because the situation they were in at that point in time was they were in a space where it was like a prison break type of situation. So they really needed to go somewhere. So I asked for permission for them, and imagine it's a Sunday afternoon. I wanted to go home, but at the same time, so I had to go home and then go to this place to just check if everything is okay, and then to ensure that they got back home safe. So there were their sisters. So we get to this place, we're talking, we're chilling, and then one of the girl, who's the youngest at that time, I think they were like 15. So at this point, they have grown up, like adolescence has happened, their bodies in a certain way. So in a conversation, they actually demonstrated what they would do to attract an older man, and they physically demonstrated. So mind you, they're in their swimming attire. So this girl like scoops over, like she bends over physically, with her boobs being now exposed a bit, and she's 15, and she's talking to her friends like this is a skill she's developed since she was 10. That moment is when it hit me that if you don't catch this earlier, if you're not involved earlier, they already process it very quickly, and at 14, 15, they actually know exactly how to do and respond to the attention that they are getting. So I think I'm saying this on to just push that point home of just trying to catch this earlier. If you can catch it at, let's say, 12, 10 to 12 is
no.
This is from a guy. From
sorry,
a lady's perspective, you need probably to start at 7.
Yes, that's more like it.
Yes. Yeah, and for the guy, let me speak for the boys. Incidentally, in the same, the older brother has become this smooth talker and would get any girl this guy wants, and he's known how to maneuver, and he's just a young adult.
Yeah.
And I realized even with my own son, one of the things, he's 8, and I'm trying to figure out is, how do I make this guy start to understand that he needs to defend his honor, in terms of if he's being bullied, he needs to defend his honor. He needs to stand up and realize. But at the same time, how does he know that he needs to protect and have a healthy relationship with women? Like, he needs to understand that he's the stronger one. He needs to protect his sister, his mother, and anyone in his environment who's younger, that and is a girl, that they need to start. So they start having that mental image of, I need to protect ladies because they need my protection. I'm the man around. So that idea of taking advantage of women does not settle in, because that's what the society will begin to communicate to you as a small boy, that you can easily prey on the vulnerable. You can tell a girl sweet words, and they are yours for the night, something like that. So to begin to shape that image of women are to be protected. Women are your younger sisters and your older sisters. They're your moms. They're your aunties, and they need a certain type of. There's a certain role that you play in the society as a boy as you're growing up. Yeah.
And I think one of the things you're mentioning, one of the things you're talking about is character development, which I think is a big deal right across the board. And I know we haven't talked much about this, but then serving, and I don't mean serving in the Christianese way. I mean actually reaching out to somebody who's less privileged than you are. We look at it from, in the corporate setting, we look at that whole CSR kind of thing, and we look for special days to go and give to homes and things like that. But like Mwix mentioned earlier, she has an initiative she calls Care to Share, right? And it really reaches out to less privileged or underprivileged children, and young people in different situations. And like one of the things that has really helped me, it's sort of like help my children have a sense of humility, is exposing them to places where there are people who have less than them, in terms of not just finances, but even opportunities. There's some people who are dealt a raw deal in life from the beginning. Last week, we talked about adverse childhood experiences. We have teenagers who end up having their parents thrown in jail for one reason or another. We can't assume that our teens only hang out with teens who are coming from the same background. So if your child has been living such an overprotected life that they've never met a kid who had to pick food from a dustbin to eat, who never met a kid who was probably molested by their parents, who's never met a kid who has been thrown out of school for school fees over and over and over again, if they've not interacted with children who have had less than them, then the day they face adversity as individuals, they won't know what to do with it. They will think it's the end of the world because they've never seen anybody be at that level in their life. They've never assumed that somebody can sleep hungry, somebody can sleep in a shack, somebody can have absolutely nothing. So one of the other ways of supporting our teens' mental wellness is helping them see a different side of life. The same way you will put them on a matatu so that they can learn how to go around town by themselves, is the same way you will introduce them to people who have less than they have, so they can see it's possible to survive, So yeah, that's another thing that I'd like to add. And Mwix can probably talk a bit more. Wait, before you say something, Mwix, I remember one time we had this thing that I think you did something at in Roy, Made in the Streets, and we were talking to girls who had been rehabilitated, sort of like off the street.
Yes.
And I remember my daughter asking some of them, and she went to hang out with like 3 of them, because I remember they even exchanged numbers and things like that. But I remember one of the questions that she came back, one of the statements she came back home with was she had asked one of the girls, or two of the girls, I don't remember, what is the one thing that they wish they had done to avoid being on the street? And to tell you the truth, I have not been on the street, therefore I would never have been able to say with authority that you should do X to avoid being on the street. But those girls actually answered my daughter in a way. She didn't tell me all the details, but she came and told me, hey, me from now on, I know what I need to do to never get into this situation. And that's because she heard from a peer. She didn't hear from somebody talking down at her. She heard from a fellow 15-year-old that this is how I got on the street and this is what I would have done to avoid it. So this is just something, this is really off the cuff, not part of this conversation, but I feel like part of the ways of building our teens' resilience is to actually show them a different form of struggle or a different form of suffering that they may never get a chance to see. So Mwix, maybe you can talk a bit about what you do.
Yeah, actually, before I go there, there's something when Mark was talking earlier, there's a point that was really burning. I was like, oh, let me just listen to this first. And it's about you know, the affirmation that needs to be given to the girls when they're growing up, and just the compliments that they need to be given when they're growing up to grow their confidence. Because right now it is something that is happening in our society right now, as much as maybe we have not come, maybe it is not around us or directly, but for me, I have come across people who are going through this situation whereby a girl you throw a compliment to a girl and she's like, oh, okay, now he wants to have sex with me. Or a guy takes you for a date, you go have lunch or have dinner, and then the girl is already like, okay, yeah, today is that day. So yeah, it's, it's going down because they've already they've already taken me for a date. So yeah, this is what I have to do. But now I like also the point that you brought up, Shalom, that about the father or this male figure hanging out with this girl and just calling her to womanhood, like, this is someone you can trust, is someone who is after nothing but just seeing you growing on the right track. I think it's really, really, really important, because right now, hey, things are happening and it is crazy. And when you come in between, like, you're trying to tell someone, hey, wait a minute, you guys just went for a date, it's a date, and they're looking at you like, hey, Mwix, you're ungrateful. How can you be taken for a date and then you just say that's it? Why can't you
like
just
a date has to have fringe benefits.
Yes, be grateful.
The sad thing is,
it is so sad that ni kutuma fare too. Like mtu tu akituma fare, that is equal to.
Yeah, but now you see, back again to the message in the mess.
Yeah.
The messaging these kids are getting is that if somebody tumas fare, or if somebody buys something for you, then you have to give something in return.
Yeah.
Because we are not teaching them boundaries from the beginning.
Yeah.
And if you teach kids boundaries from the beginning, then they're able to transition into some of these situations better, and they're able to handle them better.
Yeah, can I also add?
Yeah.
Not forgetting that also the point of also the boy, they need to be told, you don't take advantage of it, like, because they easily, immediately you meet someone who's vulnerable and maybe they just need 1,000 shillings to sort out their or whatever, and this, if I turn this button on, it can be whatever. If I just use this one, it works. Because on the other flip side is that if men are also not taught to do that, we are working on one side. You'll just be helping the girls, but the boys basically.
Yeah, it's a question that comes up every time we are having, like when I do the life skills programs with the girls, when I do the Shades of Pink sessions with girls, whenever we talk about decent dressing, they ask, so who's telling the boys not to look at me as a sexual object? Why is it that I'm the one who has to take care of how I'm dressing and the boy can't take care of how he's looking at me?
Yeah.
And yes, that's just illustration of, yes, that's a question that girls are asking. And we need to help them get through that process.
Yeah.
Now, guess what? We are way over time. And I don't know whether we have any questions that may need to be answered, because I think we've tried to address them as they were coming up. Yeah, so if there are any more comments, we have at least like 5 more minutes within which we can answer them. But as you're typing them or, you know, deciding how you're going to ask the question, so far we have looked at things that we have almost some control over as far as the teens' mental wellness is concerned, right? Next week, I'd like us to look at things that are beyond our control, because sometimes everything is going on well, and then that circle of wellness breaks, and it's not anything that you could have done as a parent. You know, many times when we're having a lot of these parenting sessions, or we're having sessions where we're having conversations with parents, it almost looks like it's the parent's fault, it's the parent's fault, the parent has to do this, the parent has to do that. And I don't like the fact that sometimes it may leave us feeling as though, you know, like, what do I do? It's my fault that things are not working out. What I want to say is our teens' mental wellness is not always our fault. And part of different ways of supporting them is to understand there are certain things that are beyond our control, and they're going to end up messing up our teens' emotional health, right? And their mental health. So next week, we'll actually be looking at what happens when that circle of wellness actually breaks. Yeah. Any questions or comments? Yes, there's one on Facebook that says, why is it, this is a follow-up, because the question has been now, you know, does that mean that you will need to bring a lady to bring out the man, in a guy? And I said, no, ladies don't bring out the man in a boy. And then the further question is, why is it that ladies do not bring out the man in a boy, and yet we use a man to bring out the woman in a girl? It's not just about sexuality, it has to do with certain character traits, so to speak. And so you find that the lady is traditionally more gentle, is traditionally a nurturing person, which is what they have been, you know, addressed as much as possible. And the man is being called to the things that Mark is saying. The man is being called to protect, to be the stronger person, to respect, to guide, to provide, you know, to lead. That's what a man is being called out to do. So the lady, and this is something that single and solo moms have managed to do. You know, there are those who are single, and there are those who are married but parenting solo. They have managed to call out the man in a boy, but they still don't do it the same way that a guy would, right? I have had experience doing certain things like that, and it's not that a woman will never ever do that, but that the woman is not the ideal person to call out the man in a boy, because at some point you're shortchanged. You will never feel what a guy feels. You will never operate the way a guy operates. So there are certain things that a woman will not go through that a guy will go through. And so she cannot be the one calling out the man from a boy. It won't work. It won't naturally work properly. But when we're talking about a man bringing out the woman in a girl, again, we didn't say he's the only person. But because women are, what do I say? Let me simplify how I normally put it, like for teens when we're talking about sex and sexuality. To please a woman, to attract a woman, a lot of the time she needs to feel a certain way. And men are well placed to manipulate that, as Mark was mentioning. Men are well placed to manipulate that thing that a woman actually needs. The minute they know the key to turn, they will do it. Now, women, on the other hand, know exactly what to show a man. You know, like the example again that Mark has just given, that a woman knows that if she hangs out the twins to talk to a guy's face, the guy will just be looking at the twins before she can see, you know, and his body is going to respond a certain way. a man needs to be the one to tell a woman that she doesn't need to get to that point. Because you see, what this girl is doing is trying to attract the men. So it's more believable. So it's not a matter of equality and things like that. We are not trying to say, oh, men are this and the women are this. It's not a fight about equality. It's about what are some of the characteristics that we have, you know, based on both sexes, and how can we leverage on the people that we have around us. In this case, how can we leverage on the men bringing out the woman in our daughters? And how can we leverage on the man also bringing out the man in our girls? And it doesn't make the woman useless in a man's life, as we had talked about earlier. It just says that the roles are actually different. Yeah. So other comments or questions? Yes, Mark.
I wanted to add the part for what the moms play in the as a role for guys.
Mm-hmm.
Is yes, in the boys' life, is that nurturing aspect. Like if a man does not receive that nurturing, because fathers don't nurture, like they don't have that motherly love and just care and because you'll be disciplined by your father, and then your mother has a way to just hata mama yako akikupiga, there's a way they still just can come around and make the like it's like it not happen. It didn't happen when you're younger. So there's that love that mothers give to boys that they can never receive it from any quarter. And of course, when they get older, there's a part they transition and they look like they don't need it. But there's a reason as to why when men are beaten, even when Nani was being killed on the ground, Floyd,
yes.
not Floyd, he was called who?
George
he called
Floyd.
out to his mother, like,
okay.
Yes, George Floyd. Like, there's a reason as to why an old man of that age, the first person they will call out is the mother, because of that motherly care and nurture that if you just give, that boy will be okay.
Yeah. I would actually like to conclude by repeating a comment that had been made much earlier in the session. And say that, yes, this is why this is a series, because we'll never finish this conversation. But let me go back to a comment that said, many parents need to heal to become better parents. One of the ways we push our kids further away is our egos and not listening. Hurt people, hurt others. Many children are troubled because of the pain from home. And then the question had been, how can such parents be helped to help their children? Because there are layers and layers of trauma unchecked. Granted, a woman is supposed to nurture, but there are women who are walking around with so much damage. They've been hurt so much by past experiences that they're causing damage to teenagers. So there are times when, you see, you're saying this woman is a nurturer and they're the ones who are going to soften the blow when the dad gives it and all that stuff. There are some who are worse than fathers. We have a few exceptions where we have fathers who are more nurturing than mothers. So back again to, when we are having these conversations, we are not talking about absolutes. We are saying that much as this is the natural tendency, there's going to be that mom who drives people up the wall. I know very many women are walking around with mother wounds, as we like calling them, right? Their mom went crazy on them, treated them so badly that they have gone a certain direction just because of the trauma they got from their mothers. So not every mother is going to be a nurturing mother, much as they're expected to. Same reason why we say not every woman is supposed to be getting a child. So there's no pressure to actually fit into a certain mold. But bottom line is to understand, how am I dealing with this mentally? And is trying to fit into a prescribed mold going to mess me up? That's a question. But because we are talking about supporting our teens, is pushing them into a specific mold going to mess them up? Is pushing them into a relationship with a guy who's supposed to be calling out the woman in the girl going to mess this girl up? At the end of the day, we have to ask, every decision that we are making, how is it helping or not helping this particular kid? And when we see there's a problem, we go back and reflect on what possibly happened that could have been the root of all this, because sometimes the mess is actually the fruit of something that happened. Yeah. I think if there are no questions, we can have Mwix, maybe you can give some closing remarks and then we continue with this conversation next week.
Oh yeah, definitely. This conversation, yeah. We can stay here for 2 hours. Yeah. But I mean, it's been amazing. I mean, these are conversations that we definitely need to go on with, because they are, you know, there are things that are happening right now in the society. Even when you look at social media, when you look at the way people are branding themselves, when you look at even the celebrities around and what the message they're trying to sell to the young people, like, if we do not have these kind of conversations, and if these kids are not rooted somewhere, they will get lost, because these are their mentors. These are the people they're looking up to. These are the people who are calling the shots. Yeah. So if there's no better foundation for them to follow, then that is it. You know. So yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to next Tuesday for more of this. Yeah. So yeah, it's been amazing. And maybe for those people who joined somewhere in the middle, the conversation is live on the recording is on Facebook, yeah, on Retro Group page. And
also on YouTube.
And on YouTube, yeah.
It will be on YouTube later, rather. It will be on YouTube by end of night, yeah.
Yeah, but right away you can just catch it on Facebook. Yeah, that's it from me. See you next Tuesday.
Mariko.
Oh, yes. Kama kawaida, we are happy. We are happy to have these conversations because mainly our passion is to help families, and especially for me to see young people get into better spaces and deal with mental health and these issues. Because we realize that parents are by the end of the day, they are the break or make it of this conversation. So if we don't ourselves put in the work, then by the time they're coming to church for me to disciple them, it becomes a harder job. So this is a shortcut for us. Like, if we can get to the parents and help, then we'll have an easier time with the children by the time they're coming to us. So thank you guys for coming on board and staying all this long while with us. Let me pray for us. Lord, we thank you for this conversation. Thank you for every child, teenager, parent represented in this Zoom meeting. We pray for every family that God, you may begin to, and you may also continue to change something. May it be small or big, how big it would be. I pray for every family that God, you may do something to begin changing and transforming our lives, that will not just be here in vain, that this knowledge that is being passed on, that it will help someone, it will change a family, it will change a life, it will change a course of a teenager's life, it will change the course of a family's life, that and to your glory. I pray for covering over every family. In Jesus' name we pray.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you all. Have a lovely evening. See you next week. Bye.
Bye.
You're welcome. You're all welcome.